The sound of my tires was a soft, rhythmic crunch against the freshly fallen snow. It was a sound that belonged to my childhood, a sound that meant I was almost home. Outside the windows of my beat-up sedan, the Vermont landscape was a perfect Christmas card. Pines heavy with white, the sky a deep, bruised purple of late afternoon, and the air so cold it felt clean and sharp in my lungs every time the heater sputtered. I took a sip of the lukewarm coffee from my travel mug, the bitter taste a familiar companion on the 5-hour drive from my tiny New York City apartment. The city was all noise and nervous energy, a constant hum of a million lives running parallel. But here, the silence was so profound it felt like a presence. It was a silence I'd craved for months, a silence I associated with family, with warmth. With the one time of year I let myself believe everything was as simple as it seemed. As I turned onto the long, winding driveway, my headlights cut through the twilight, illuminating the old house. It stood there, a 2-story colonial, just as it always had, with warm yellow light spilling from the downstairs windows and a single, elegant wreath on the big red door. For a moment, a wave of pure, uncomplicated happiness washed over me. This was home. The smell of my dad's wood smoke was already in the air, a scent of hickory and safety, that I killed the engine, and the sudden quiet was broken by the front door swinging open. My mom, Carol, stood framed in the doorway, a silhouette against the golden light. Her silver hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun, and she was wiping her hands on an apron that probably had flour on it. "Maya, you made it." Her voice was warm, carrying across the frosty air like a melody. That I pushed my car door open, a blast of cold air hitting my face. "Hey Mom." Traffic was a bear. I pulled my suitcase from the back, its wheels sinking into the snow, and crunched my way toward her. The hug she gave me was all-encompassing. It smelled of yeast and cinnamon and her lavender perfume, a combination that was the very essence of my mother. It felt like coming up for air. "Oh, let me look at you," she said, holding me at arm's length. Her eyes, a pale, worried blue, scanned my face. "You're too thin. The city is eating you alive." "I'm fine, Mom." I laughed, a familiar script we played out every visit. "Just busy." "Well, you're here now. We'll fatten you up." She ushered me inside, and the warmth of the house was a physical thing, a heavy, fragrant blanket settling over me. The Christmas tree stood in its usual spot by the bay window, a towering Douglas fir twinkling with 1,000 tiny lights, and decorated with a lifetime of mismatched ornaments. The whole house was a symphony of festive sensations, the glitter of tinsel catching the light, the faint, cheerful sound of a Christmas carol coming from the kitchen radio, the deep, soft rug under my worn-out boots. That my dad, Robert, came in from the living room, a book in one hand. He was a quieter presence than my mom, his affection shown in small gestures. He smelled of old paper and wood smoke. He wrapped me in a gentle hug, his scratchy wool sweater rough against my cheek. "Good to have you home, kiddo." "It's good to be home, Dad." From the top of the stairs, another voice called out, this one sharper, more cynical. "Look what the cat dragged in from the big city." My older brother, Mark, descended the staircase, a smug grin on his face. He was the golden child, the successful lawyer with the perfect wife and the 2.5 perfect children who were, thankfully, already asleep upstairs. He was dressed in a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Very funny, Mark," I said, managing a smile. "Nice to see you two." His wife, Sarah, followed him down. She was immaculate, as always, her blonde hair perfect, her smile bright and polished. She gave me a delicate, air kiss on each cheek greeting that smelled of expensive floral perfume. "Maya, darling, you look artistic." It was her code for, "You look like you just rolled out of a van." "And you look perfect, as usual," I replied, the words tasting a little like ash. The dynamic was already settling back into place. Mom the fussing hen, Dad the quiet observer, Mark the benevolent king, Sarah his flawless queen, and me. I was the satellite, orbiting their perfect little world. The first evening was a blur of comfort. We ate my mom's beef stew, thick and rich, in the cozy dining room. The candlelight danced on the polished wood of the old table, making everything feel soft and magical. The conversation was light, full of questions about my latest art projects, which I knew they didn't really understand, and updates about Mark's latest courtroom victory, which they understood perfectly. I felt the tension in my shoulders, a constant companion in the city, begin to melt away. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe we could just be a family, without the subtle judgments and unspoken competitions. That I went to bed in my old room, the walls still a pale, dreamy blue from when I was 16. It was filled with ghosts of my former self, old paperbacks, a dusty sketch pad, a faded poster of a band I no longer listened to. The bed was soft, the flannel sheets smelling of cedar from the linen closet. Outside, the wind whispered through the eaves of the old house, a familiar lullaby. I fell asleep feeling safe, feeling like I belonged. The next morning, Christmas Eve, the house was alive with a cheerful, bustling energy. The air was thick with the smell of brewing coffee and bacon frying. The kids, my niece and nephew, were up, their excited shrieks echoing through the hallways. I felt a pang of something warm and nostalgic as I helped Mom roll out dough for gingerbread cookies, the sticky, spicy scent clinging to my fingers. We listened to old Christmas records on my dad's vintage turntable, the crackle and pop of the vinyl a comforting backdrop to our work, that IT was all so perfectly, wonderfully normal. The moment it all shattered came quietly, without any warning. It was later that afternoon. My phone, a lifeline to my city life, had finally died after a full day of ignoring it. I was trying to look up a recipe for a glaze I wanted to try on the ham. Mom, my phone's dead. Can I borrow yours or the iPad or something? I called out from the living room, where I was tangled in a string of lights that had mysteriously gone dark. Sure, honey, she called back from the kitchen. The old iPad is on the charger on the hall table. The password is still our old address, 1234 Elm Street. I found it easily, the silver device cool to the touch. I unplugged it and carried it back to the sofa, curling my legs underneath me. The worn, comfy cushions of the couch sighed as I settled in. I typed in the password, and the screen blinked to life. It opened to the last app that had been used. A messaging app, and there it was. A group chat. The name of the group was Home Base. The members were listed at the top: Mom, Dad, Mark, Sarah. Everyone but me. My heart gave a little jolt, a quick, sharp thud against my ribs. It was probably for logistics, I told myself. Planning surprises or something. A rational explanation. But my fingers, acting of their own accord, began to scroll up. I couldn't stop them. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. The messages went back months. Years even. Mark, she's confirmed for the 23rd. Full Maya protocol is a go. Sarah, got it. Hiding all the good wine. Prepare for monologues about the struggling artist's soul. A little laugh emoji followed her message. A cold knot started to form in my stomach. It was just teasing. Brothers and sisters tease each other. That's all it was. I kept scrolling. Mom, Robert, did you remember to move the financial statements from the desk drawer? We can't have her stumbling on them. It would only lead to questions we aren't ready for. Dad, already done, Carol. They're in the safe. She won't find a thing. Financial statements? What financial statements? The cold knot in my stomach tightened, turning icy. I could hear them all in the kitchen, their laughter light and easy. It sounded monstrous now, alien. I scrolled further, my thumb moving faster, more desperately. Mark, just had another call with the realtor. The offer is solid. They want to close by the end of January. We need to handle Maya carefully over Christmas. It's the last one in this house. We have to make it seem normal. The last one in this house. The words didn't compute at first. My brain refused to process them. Sell the house. This house. The house I was sitting in. The one that held every memory I cherished. The one they had always promised would stay in the family forever. A wave of nausea washed over me, hot and sickening. The smell of gingerbread from the kitchen, so comforting just moments before, now seemed cloying, suffocating that I kept scrolling, my vision blurring. My breath was shallow, caught high in my chest. Mom, I still feel terrible about this. She loves this place so much. Sarah, Carol, it's for the best. The upkeep is a fortune. And with the money from the sale, you and Robert can finally retire properly, and we can put a down payment on the lake house. It's a win-win. Maya doesn't contribute. She doesn't get a say. It's that simple. Mark, Sarah's right, Mom. Her share will be more than enough to set her up. She'll get over it. We just have to manage the narrative. My share. They had already decided my share. A number they had calculated in secret. A value they had placed on my history, my home. I felt a tremor start in my hands, the iPad suddenly heavy and cold as a block of ice. I could hear the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears, a roaring static that drowned out the distant, happy sounds from the kitchen. And then I saw the message that broke me. The one that took the carefully constructed world of my life and smashed it into a million unrecognizable pieces. It was from my mother, dated from a few weeks ago. Mom, Mark, I spoke to the estate lawyer. He says because of the circumstances of Maya's parentage, her legal claim to the primary inheritance is complicated. He said it's better if she agrees to a settlement without knowing the full picture. It protects us all. The circumstances of Maya's parentage, as in singular, not parents. The word hung there on the screen, pulsing with a venomous light. It was a typo. It had to be a typo. My mind scrambled for a rational explanation, for anything other than the hideous, monstrous truth that was beginning to dawn in the deepest, most terrified part of my soul that I scrolled up, frantically now, searching for more. I found it. An older thread, from over a year ago. Dad, Carol, are we ever going to tell her the truth about her father? Mom, Robert, we've been over this. What good would it do? It would destroy her. And it would destroy our family. He made his choice when he walked away before she was even born. You are her father. That's the only truth that matters, that he made his choice when he walked away. You are her father. The iPad slipped from my trembling fingers, landing with a soft thud on the plush rug. The air in my lungs turned to poison. I couldn't breathe. The warm, cozy living room, with its twinkling tree and the scent of Christmas, began to spin. The walls seemed to be closing in, the cheerful light from the windows turning harsh and accusatory, that my entire life, my entire identity, was a lie. A carefully constructed narrative, as Mark had put it. I wasn't just the odd one out, the artistic daughter they didn't quite understand. I was a secret. I was a problem to be managed. I was the project. In another message, I'd seen them refer to me that way. How's the project holding up? Mark had asked. So far so good, Mom had replied. She's completely oblivious. A sound escaped my throat, a choked, ragged gasp. In the kitchen, the laughter stopped. Maya? Honey, is everything okay? My mother's voice. The voice of a stranger that I couldn't answer. I stood up, my legs unsteady, feeling like a newborn foal. I looked around the room, at the smiling photos on the mantelpiece. There I was, a gap-toothed 7-year-old, sitting on Robert's, on my dad's lap. He was smiling down at me, a genuine, loving smile. Or was it all an act? A 30-year performance? Every memory I had of this house, of this family, was now tainted, coated in a layer of deceit. The comforting smell of wood smoke, the taste of my mom's stew, the weight of my dad's hand on my shoulder, it was all part of the set dressing for a play in which I was the only person who didn't have the script. That I stumbled out of the living room and into the hallway. They were standing there, just outside the kitchen, their faces a mixture of confusion and concern. My mother, my brother, his wife, the man I had called Dad my entire life. They looked at me, and for the first time, I saw them for what they were. A committee. A board of directors for the corporation of my life. A life they had secretly managed, and were now preparing to liquidate. That my mother took a step toward me, her brow furrowed. Maya, you're white as a sheet. What is it? I looked down at the iPad on the floor, then back up at their faces. The concern in their eyes curdled into dawning horror as they followed my gaze and understood. The silence in the hallway was absolute. It was no longer a peaceful silence. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air, all the warmth out of the house. The only sound was the frantic, panicked drumming of my own heart, that I finally found my voice. It came out as a whisper, ragged and broken. Who am I? The air in the hallway was thick and suffocating, each breath a struggle. My question hung between us, a fragile, terrible thing. I watched their faces, a slow-motion ballet of emotions. My mother's concern collapsing into pure, unadulterated panic. Robert's quiet face crumbling, the gentle lines around his eyes suddenly looking like cracks in a porcelain mask. Mark's expression hardened instantly, shifting from surprise to a cold, calculated defensiveness. Sarah just looked terrified, her eyes darting between Mark and me, as if looking for the safest place to stand when the explosion came. My mother, Carol, was the first to speak. Her voice was a strained, trembling whisper. What are you talking about, sweetheart? The endearment, so natural just an hour ago, was now a shard of glass in my ear. I took a shaky step back, my hand finding the wall for support. The cool, textured wallpaper was the only solid thing in a world that was tilting and dissolving around me. The iPad, I said, my voice gaining a sliver of strength, fueled by a rising tide of ice-cold rage. The group chat. Home base. I spat the name out, the words tasting like venom. You forgot to close it. Sarah let out a tiny, almost inaudible gasp and took a half-step behind Mark. My mother's face went completely slack, the color draining from her cheeks. She looked suddenly old, fragile. Robert just closed his eyes, a look of profound, weary resignation on his face. He wasn't even going to deny it. Maya, My mother started, her hands fluttering in front of her like wounded birds. You don't understand. It's complicated. Complicated? I heard my own voice rise, echoing unnaturally in the cozy, wood-paneled hallway. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my chest. Complicated? You're selling my home behind my back. You've been lying to me my entire life about who my father is. It doesn't sound complicated. It sounds like a conspiracy. Mark stepped forward, taking charge, his lawyer mode activating. His voice was low and steady, a tone meant to calm a hysterical witness. Now, let's all just take a breath. You're jumping to conclusions, Maya. You're emotional. Emotional? I stared at him, incredulous. You call me the project. You talk about managing the narrative. You're liquidating my childhood and discussing my share like I'm a disgruntled employee you need to pay off. And you think I'm the one who's overreacting. It's not like that, my mom insisted, tears welling in her eyes, her voice cracking. We were going to tell you. After the holidays. We wanted to have one last perfect Christmas together. A perfect lie, you mean? I shot back, the words sharp and cruel. The festive decorations lining the hallway, the garland draped over the doorways, the cheerful red bows, seemed to mock me, a gaudy, hollow charade. One last performance before you brought the curtain down. Was any of it real? Any of it? I looked at Robert, the man I'd called Dad. He finally opened his eyes, and they were filled with a deep, bottomless sadness. It was real for me, Maya, he said, his voice a low rumble of pain. Every bit of it. I have always loved you as my own. But I'm not your own, am I? The question was raw, torn from the deepest part of me. That's the point. I'm somebody else's. Somebody you all decided I shouldn't know. Who is he? Silence. My mother started to sob quietly, her hand over her mouth. Who is he? I demanded, louder this time, my voice shaking with the force of my anger and grief. It doesn't matter, Mark said, his tone dismissive. He was a mistake your mother made a long time ago. He has no bearing on your life. No bearing on my life? I turned my fury on him. You used it. You used it as a legal excuse to cut me out of my inheritance. To sell this house and divvy up the profits. So don't you dare tell me it doesn't matter. It seems to matter a whole lot to your bank account. Sarah put a restraining hand on her husband's arm. Mark, don't. He shook her off. Someone has to be the adult here, he said, his eyes cold and hard. Yes, we are selling the house. It's a financial necessity. Mom and Dad can't afford the upkeep, and you, Maya, have never contributed a single dime to it. You float through life in your little artistic bubble, while the rest of us deal with the real world. This house is an asset. We are leveraging that asset to secure this family's future. My family? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous low. Or your family? Because it's starting to feel like I was never really a part of it. Just a border you had to accommodate. That's not true, my mother cried out, her sobs growing louder. We love you. We were trying to protect you. Protect me? Or protect yourselves? Your perfect family image? I looked from one face to another, seeing the years of shared glances, the silent agreements, the secret conversations that had shaped my world without my knowledge. Every Christmas, every birthday, every time you told me you loved me, was it all just part of the plan? Keep Maya happy, keep her in the dark? The smell of the Christmas tree, the rich, earthy scent of pine, filled my nostrils, and I felt like I was going to be sick. I thought of all the times I'd felt like an outsider, like I didn't quite fit. I had always chalked it up to my different interests, my less conventional life path. But it was never about that. It was because they all shared a fundamental secret that excluded me. I was the other. I had always been the other. I need to get out of here, I whispered, more to myself than to them. The walls felt tighter, the air thinner. I turned and started toward the staircase, my body moving on autopilot. I needed my room, my things. I needed to be surrounded by something that was mine, something that wasn't part of their lie. Maya, wait, Robert said, his voice pleading. He took a step toward me, his hand outstretched. Please, don't go. Let's talk about this. I flinched away from his touch as if it were fire. I looked at his outstretched hand, the hand that had taught me to ride a bike, that had held mine at my high school graduation, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty chasm of betrayal. There's nothing to talk about, I said, the coldness in my own voice surprising me. You've all been talking enough for a lifetime. Behind my back. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my boots thudding heavily on the old wood. I could hear their frantic, muffled voices below me, a cacophony of blame and panic. I told you this would happen, Carol. Mark's voice sharp with anger. What was I supposed to do? Tell a 5-year-old she was the product of a summer fling. My mother's voice hysterical. "We should have handled it years ago," Robert's voice, full of regret. Their words followed me up the stairs, chasing me, each one another nail in the coffin of the family I thought I had. I slammed my bedroom door shut, the sound echoing the violent shattering inside my own chest. The room, my childhood sanctuary, now felt like a prison cell. I slid down the door, my back pressed against the wood, and finally let out the sound that had been building inside me, a raw, ragged sob of pure, undiluted agony. The perfect Christmas was over. My life as I knew it was over. And I was utterly, terrifyingly alone in a house full of strangers that I sat on the floor of my room, the rough wood of the door against my back, and listened to the storm downstairs. Their voices rose and fell, a turbulent sea of accusation and justification. The words were indistinct, but the tones were clear. Mark's cutting anger, my mother's weeping defense, Robert's defeated murmurs. They were fighting about the lie, about how to manage the fallout, how to control the damage. They were still managing the narrative that my own tears had stopped. A strange, cold calm was spreading through me, starting in my chest and moving outward to my fingertips. It was the calm of shock, the numbness that comes after a devastating injury. I looked around my room, at the artifacts of a life that no longer felt like my own. The faded photograph on my nightstand showed a smiling, pigtailed girl. Me at age 10, proudly holding up a string of fish, with Robert beaming beside me. A lie. The finger painting I'd made for my mother in first grade, framed on the wall, with the clumsy letters, "To the best mommy in the world." My entire history in this house, in this family, was a forgery. And I was the counterfeit masterpiece. With a deep, shuddering breath, I pushed myself up from the floor. My movements were stiff, robotic. I pulled my battered suitcase from the corner where I'd left it and laid it open on the bed. The soft, floral-patterned comforter, the one I'd had since I was a teenager, felt alien beneath my hands that I started packing. My hands moved with a mechanical efficiency, pulling clothes from the dresser drawers, folding them without seeing them. The soft wool of a sweater, the cool silk of a blouse. They were just objects. The sentimental value they once held had evaporated, turned to smoke. I packed my toiletries from the bathroom, the familiar scents of my shampoo and soap now smelling foreign, disconnected from the comforting routines they once represented. Downstairs, the argument had subsided into a tense, heavy silence. The only sound was the incessant, cheerful tinkling of a Christmas carol from a forgotten radio in the kitchen. "Have yourself a merry little Christmas," a smooth baritone crooned. The irony was a physical blow, and I had to lean against the doorframe for a moment, my stomach clenching. There was a soft knock on the door. "Maya?" It was Robert's voice, gentle, pleading that I didn't answer. I just continued to pack, the zip of a bag, the rustle of fabric, the only reply. "Maya, please," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Can I talk to you for a minute?" I walked over to the door and turned the lock. The click was loud and final in the quiet room. On the other side of the door, I heard a deep, ragged sigh. He stayed there for a long time. I could feel his presence, a weight of unspoken words and 30 years of deceit pressing against the wood. Eventually, I heard his footsteps retreat, slow and heavy, down the hall. My bag was packed. I looked around the room one last time. My eyes fell on the sketchpad on my desk. I picked it up. Its pages were filled with drawings of this house, of the trees in the yard, of the view from this very window in different seasons. It was a love letter to a place I now had to leave. I left it on the desk. It belonged to the ghost of the girl who used to live here. Zipping up my suitcase felt like an act of finality. The sound was harsh, severing the last thread that connected me to this place. I grabbed my coat and my purse, slung my bag over my shoulder, and took one last deep breath. The air in the room was stale with grief. When I opened the door, my mother was standing there, her face blotchy and swollen from crying. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, her usual matriarchal strength completely gone, replaced by a desperate fragility. "You can't leave," she whispered, her hands clasped in front of her. "It's Christmas Eve. There's a storm coming." "I'm not staying here," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I couldn't afford emotion right now. If I let it in, it would drown me. "But where will you go?" she asked, a fresh wave of tears spilling down her cheeks. "The roads aren't safe. Please, Maya. Stay. We can fix this." "Fix this?" I looked her in the eye, and I saw not a mother, but a woman who had made a choice, and then 1,000 more choices after it, to protect herself. "You can't fix a lie that's 32 years old. You can't unbreak a life." I tried to step around her, but she blocked my path, grabbing my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "I did it because I loved you," she said, her voice rising with a desperate intensity. "He was nothing, Maya. A summer romance, a mistake. He didn't want you. I wanted you. Robert wanted you. We gave you a life, a good life. A family. You gave me a lie," I said, pulling my arm from her grasp. "You gave me a foundation of sand, and now it's all washed away. I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know who I am." I pushed past her and walked to the top of the stairs. They were all down there, in the entryway, looking up at me. Mark, with his arms crossed, his face a mask of stubborn resentment. Sarah, looking pale and sick, avoiding my eyes. And Robert, standing by the front door, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He just looked broken. A small, selfish part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction at their misery, but it was quickly consumed by the vast, empty ache in my own chest that I descended the stairs, each step a deliberate, heavy punctuation mark on the end of my childhood. No one spoke. The only sound was my boots on the wooden treads and the cheerful, oblivious music still playing from the kitchen. When I reached the bottom, I walked toward the front door without looking at any of them. Robert stepped aside, his hand on the doorknob. "I'm sorry, Maya," he whispered as I passed. "For what it's worth, I am so sorry." I paused for a fraction of a second, my back to him. I wanted to turn. I wanted to scream at him, to ask him how he could live with himself, how he could watch me grow up under the shadow of this monumental lie. But I couldn't. The words were gone. All that was left was the cold, hard need to escape that I opened the front door myself. A blast of frigid air rushed in, smelling of snow and pine and a clean, sharp freedom. It felt like the first honest breath I had taken in hours. The snow was coming down harder now, thick, silent flakes swirling in the beam of the porch light, that I stepped out onto the porch, the cold seeping through my jeans instantly. I didn't look back. I couldn't bear to see their faces, to see the false warmth of the house I was leaving behind. I crunched through the fresh snow, the sound loud in the profound silence of the winter night, that I threw my suitcase in the back of my car and slid into the driver's seat. The vinyl was stiff and freezing cold. My hands were shaking as I put the key in the ignition. The engine turned over, its familiar rumble a small, solid comfort in the chaos that I turned on the headlights, their beams cutting a path through the falling snow, and put the car in reverse. As I backed down the long driveway, I finally allowed myself one last look in the rearview mirror. The house was lit up, a perfect picture of holiday cheer. Through the big bay window, I could see the Christmas tree, its lights twinkling brightly. I could see their silhouettes, standing motionless in the open doorway, watching me leave. A family, frozen in a tableau of their own, making .my home. It had never been my home at all. It was just a house, a beautiful, well-maintained stage for a very long play. Tears I didn't know I had left began to stream down my face, hot against my cold skin. I turned the car onto the main road, away from the driveway, away from the house, away from the only life I had ever known. The windshield wipers swiped back and forth, trying to clear a path through the blinding snow, trying to clear a path to a future I couldn't begin to imagine. The taillights of my car painted the snow red for a moment, and then I was gone, swallowed up by the storm and the darkness.